What's up, everybody? Nigel Marcellus here. Welcome to another episode of the CONVO. We are on episode 4, and we keep it rolling. We keep on going. Today, we got a special guest in the building, Jazz. What's up, Jazz?
Hey, what's up?
AKA J Prince the Dawn.
Okay.
My nickname for you, Fire. Jazz. So, conversation, real conversation, authentic, organic, and we just jump right into it. So you know exactly what I'm about to ask you, bro. So a lot of times on this show, we talk about attachment styles. Mm-hmm. My attachment style is fearful avoidant. We'll talk about that very soon. I'll let you ask whatever. But what is yours? Because you are actually the first person here to bring this attachment style to this show. So what is your attachment style?
My attachment style is anxious.
Okay. And
I feel like that was a great example.
Okay. Anxious attachment style. Yes. What does that mean for the people who don't know? Or how do you kind of like receive that information?
So for me, the way that I think I've like seen it show up the most for me is really in like not even how I relate to people, but I think it is more how like I believe that people will like show up for me. And so this idea that like I crave being close to people and like feeling connected to people, but there's this like underlying belief that like people don't actually want to reciprocate that to me, even though like that's what I want. That like people don't want to, or they're not capable of doing it at like a high level. Okay,
so with that, what does that look like for you navigating that, right? So like, is it you constantly overthinking? Is it you falling? Like, how do you personally kind of like navigate that attachment style?
Yeah, it's a lot of everything. I feel like I have to like. It's a lot of overthinking and like what I call spirals, where like it's just like the overthinking and like overdrive. Yeah. And so I'm learning how to like disrupt that, particularly disrupt spirals a bit more. But it's a lot of like I'm very like critical and like I analyze and try to place a narrative on a situation or experience because I've overthought it or I've overanalyzed it, and so like I attach like my own belief to it without like going back to the other person like, hey, so this is how I actually received this, and like I'm checking in. Yeah. I just assume that like, oh no, like this is the narrative, and so either I'm overthinking it or I'm trying to overcorrect for something that's like that's not even what's happening like in this situation. Yeah.
So for you, like, right? It's so funny because I can relate to this in so many ways. When it comes to that like narrative, right? The last video with Dr. Walter, we're talking about like how do you disrupt those narratives. But I think like in order to disrupt it, sometimes you have to understand like where it comes from. So where do you feel like your attachment style like comes from for you?
I think it is like deeply rooted in rejection. I would say that's probably like if I could get to like the root, I would say that's like deeply rooted in rejection. Probably like a little sprinkle of like abandonment. But I would say like it's probably most deeply rooted in like this fear of like being rejected and like not being chosen. Okay.
And then does this show up in other avenues? Because I know like you have your own business, so does it show up in like when you're working on your business and whatnot?
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it shows up everywhere. It just shows up in like different ways. So I think in business, well, first of all, like business is hard. Like when I'm just a first gen entrepreneur. So me and my brother both have businesses, but we have 2 different businesses. But that's like our parents aren't entrepreneurs. They don't really know entrepreneurs. So we kind of like, we're just figuring it out at different points. Yeah. And so there's a lot of like overthinking and like the imposter syndrome of that you have to get over. And I'm used to like always sort of being like, oh yeah, like I kind of know what I'm doing. And entrepreneurship is when I have like I'm figuring it out as I go. And so I think about like within business, there's, like I think I'm beginning to sort of like challenge that belief, and not even that like I'm gonna be rejected, because I recognize in business like that's just a part of like selling and like having a product or service. Like not everyone's gonna buy it. But I think like I have this deep fear of like, what if nobody buys anything? Like, what if nobody wants to work with me? Like, when I was starting out, like, that was like, oh my gosh, like, what if I say that I'm a business coach and then nobody wants to work with me?
Yeah.
That hasn't happened. Like, it's fine. I've had people work with me and it's been fine.
Yeah.
But I think, like, when I initially started, like, that was, like, my worst fear. I was like, I'm going to put this out and then nobody's going to want, like, the service that I provide, or, like, nobody's going to want to work with me.
So, like, when it comes to that, right? Because I think rejection is scary. It's so scary.
It's so scary.
But I think, like, especially being a fearful avoidant, something that I've recognized in myself is that, like, you want to get a certain answer, right? Because you kind of fear that answer. Or you fear that you won't get, like, a business or anything, right?
Yeah.
Then you get it, and then it still isn't enough, right? And you feel like you have those cycles, too, of where it's, like, somebody might affirm you, validate you, say whatever, you get the business, and then, like, right after, you're just like, damn. Like, yo, I didn't do enough. I'm still...
Yeah, I feel like it ebbs and flows. I think there are times when, like I'm affirmed, and I'm like, yeah, that's right. Like, talk to me nice. And there are other times that I'm like, I don't actually believe you. Like, I don't believe you, even though, like, what you're saying, there's probably a bit of truth that I believe, but, like, I don't fully internalize it. And I remember my therapist, like, we had this conversation months ago, but we were sort of, like, unpacking this overthinking and overanalyzing. And we were talking about, like, internalizing, like, beliefs and things that, like, people tell us about ourselves. And so she was asking me, like, well, what do people tell you about yourself? Like, your boss and your friends and your parents, like, people that really know you really well. And so I was telling her, and she's like, well, are all of those people liars? And I was like, no.
Ooh.
I was like, no, because if they were liars, they wouldn't be my people. And so she's like, so if your people are telling you these, like, really great things about you, and you know that you're not around liars, then, like, why don't you always believe what they say about you? And I was like,
Damn.
So we're working on it.
Yeah.
So we're working on it. And that, like, awareness, I think, was, like, helpful. Because I think it's easy sometimes to, like, not even dismiss, but, like, to not fully internalize, like, what people tell you about yourself. Because you have your own narrative about yourself.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes hard to offset your own narrative.
How do you feel about that, though? Especially when people, like, the people closest to you are bringing up necessarily, like, bad traits or, like, toxic traits in you, right? Like, how do you receive that kind of, like, feedback from those people? Because I think it's compliments are one thing, and I know, like, a lot of people struggle with, like, receiving those. But when we're talking about, like, you probably should work on this and this and this, like, how do you personally receive it?
Yeah. It's actually really interesting because, like, I'm not gonna say I do the best job, but I actually, like, really like when people give me, like, critical feedback about, like, how I show up. Because I think it helps to improve, like, my own self-awareness of things, or it affirms that, like, oh, I think that I show up this way, and then I actually do show up this way, and I don't like that I show up this way. But I think it's all about the delivery, because, like, I have people that I know, like, I could invite them to, like, offer criticism or to give me feedback on something, and they're going to, like, tell me the truth, like, straight, no chaser, but they're going to package it in a way that, like, I need, because they know, like, oh yeah, like, she is very sensitive, like, so words matter to her. Yeah. And, like, so they don't sugarcoat it, they just deliver it, like, softly. I've been in other situations where, like, out of anger, someone just gives me some, like, really raw feedback about myself. And then, like, I was like, oh, like, that's how I've shown up this whole time? And you're just now saying that to me? And then you said it, like, out of anger. And so then it's like that. I think getting feedback like that is the hardest for me to, like, unlearn, because it feels so, like, oh my gosh, it, like, feels so damaging. And so, but those are the things, like, I accept, like, I've accepted and internalized the most, are the things that, like, they're delivered in the most damaging way. They're the most damaging, like, narratives. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's, like, I am terrible.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
See, I think, like, when it comes to me, and you know, because you've read me for multiple occasions.
One of my hobbies.
Yeah, that's fine. I think for me, like, I'm stubborn, and I think because I'm naturally somebody who, like, deflects a lot, that for me it takes people to, like, repeatedly do stuff. But I think even in that, like, I hear people the first time, but the more people do it, the more I get annoyed, not by them, but by the lack of change within myself, right? So I like, for example, like this summer, you and Jamal and Zamad and damn near everybody and their mama always would be like, Nigel, you're emotionally unavailable, right?
Yes.
And then what was the nickname that you guys coined?
Jermaine Fayez.
Jermaine Fayez.
Yeah,
Jermaine,
yeah.
And why Jermaine Fayez? For the people who don't know, Jess, why do you call me Jermaine?
Because you have like the intellectual capacity of like J. Cole, who just marks
Goat.
the
Great
goat.
show.
And but you also have the toxicity level of Brent Fayez, and that's a very deadly combination. Is to have toxic-ish tendencies and to also be an intellectual. So
thank you for the explanation. But to get to my point, it's like, yo, the more like y'all kept on saying it, although it's like, I know it's coming from a loving place, from a like self-awareness and like a work on myself place, it would always annoy me. Because I think for me, I don't want to live in that like toxic area. Like the fact that I found out that my attachment style is fearful avoidant, it pisses me off.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, it pisses me off. It's like I'm happy that I know, but it makes me mad because it's like I know this is not healthy, right? And I want everything in my life to be healthy, and I want to get to a secure attachment style. So for me, it was like that feedback, especially when people are critical. I think I automatically get in this kind of like mind space of like, I want to heal. I gotta fix this. I gotta grow from this because I don't want to be the guy who like a year later, if we're having the same conversation and y'all sitting back and like, well, Nigel, still emotionally unavailable. Like, to me, like, that is annoying.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the same way when it comes to Crystal for you?
Yeah, I remember when we first, I think we might have taken it like the same day, the attachment styles. And there's a part of me that knew that I wasn't going to get secure, but there's another part of me that was like, we better get secure.
Yeah.
And then when I did it, I was like, because somebody like one of my relationships, particularly relationships like to be healthy, like I'm a strong believer that like we are made to be in community, and so I think attachment styles like is a tool that helps you to think about like how you relate to other people, and I've always thought that like I relate to other people really well, and then so for like a tool to tell me like actually girl, it's not as healthy as you think, like it's frustrating because it's like, dang it, like I thought I did this really well, and I hate feeling like I've done something really well and then there's some other narrative that then is like, actually you're not actually that good at that. Because then I'm like, okay, well maybe I was lied to myself this whole time, or other people have been lying to me about like how I show up.
Yeah. And that goes back to like the point of what your therapist is making. Like a lot of people aren't lying to you.
Yeah.
And I think that's the one thing I had to like come to terms with is like my friends are not lying to me.
No.
They're being honest. They're being sincere. They're making jokes because they know I'm a joker. So sometimes that's how it gets to me. But it's like, I think for me, especially now, I'm in a place where I'm just kind of like, I'm tired of having like 1 foot in my new life, 1 foot in this old life, right? Like I don't want the old pain, the old trauma, the inner child to like hold me back from all the joy and greatness and love that's intended for me, all because I'm like scared or because I'm trying to avoid these connections out of fear. And I think like to your point of rejection, that's one thing I had to really, or I'm unpacking for myself is like, what are you scared of? Because I feel like lately with a lot of what's been going on as far as like me trying to like really start dating and put myself out there and tell people like, yo, I like you. Or me, even when it comes to like the CONVO series and like really stepping on to it, I'm recognizing there's a lot of fear, and then I'm really trying to learn how to like navigate what scares me. And I think that's something that's been really difficult, is really unpacking that, because then it almost sets you back in that place of like, ooh, old pain, trauma, and everything. So,
and it's like, it's interesting that you say that, because like there's a part of me that agrees that like, yes, like I just want to be like 2 feet into like showing up as like not even a different version, but like a more healed version, like a better version of myself. And then there's also a part of me that's like, but like all of this stuff that happened like before today, before now, like good or bad, like is informing the version of me today. And so
Yeah,
I can never, like, I can heal through it and I can unpack it and like all these things, but like it significantly shaped who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's not a way, and not even there's not a way, there is a way, but like I'm not convinced that we're supposed to detach from those things because like we did the best we could with what we had.
Yeah.
I'm sure that we learned some things or unlearned some things, or those are the things that like are helping us to inform our view now, right? In healthy and unhealthy ways, right? But if I get rid of all of that, then I lose all the ways in which that stuff gives me healthy information that I use today, right? And so so that would be my pushback on that, just a little.
No, so I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. I think what I struggle with then becomes like, then what is the line, right? Like, how do you know what's worth holding on to and then what's worth letting go? Because I think like you get to, or at least for me, like I get to a certain point where I get so annoyed and I get frustrated with the lack of success in growing, or like, I know better now. Why am I not doing better? That I feel like holding on to that, the old stuff is really like the blockage that's stopping me from getting to the new point.
Yeah. And I think, yes, I would agree that happens probably more times than not. And I also believe that like, I think we sometimes want like change, and when I think about change, like this self-growth, right, healing, like that to be like I've made aware and now I act differently, behave differently, think or believe differently, or like show up differently. And the reality is that like I've actually been programmed to believe something differently, and I'm just now becoming aware of something else. And so the amount of time that it's taken me to like internalize all of this belief, like this new belief doesn't happen overnight, because if it took me 29 years of believing something, and then in year 30 or 31 I get a new piece of information that like shatters that, it's like, oh yeah, I can't just go to sleep and then wake up and like know differently, because I was conditioned for 29 years to believe something different. And I think we always want to expedite the healing journey, because, well, I think for a lot of reasons, but I think we want to expedite it because it's hard. And nobody actually enjoys sitting in the hard, uncomfortable stuff. And as many people like on social media and therapists and all these people say like, you need to get uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. Like, people don't actually like that. Like, it's so against the grain of who we are. Yeah. And so it's like, yeah, I want this healing thing to happen like now, because I don't want to be uncomfortable for a long period of time and not know like, oh, like when does this finally shift from like, this is uncomfortable because I'm changing, it's like, oh, I'm like changing, I can see a better version of myself.
Do you ever feel like almost like your imagination or how you see the best version of yourself gets in the way of that too? Because I think sometimes what makes me frustrated, because I never really thought about like, damn, all this years of like this unlearning that I need to do, it can't expedite it, right? It can't happen overnight. But then I think I see the potential. Like, I have moments where I feel this like insane levels of like inspiration or insane levels of like clarity, where it's like, damn, it could all be so simple. Like, I'm just overthinking, and all I gotta do is just one or two things. And I think sometimes like that, for me, almost is blinding, or it could be blinding, because I could like imagine myself like, oh man, if I could just let go of this and let go of that, then how I would act, how I would show up would be a lot differently. So do you think like that's something that's valid, or something that kind of like gets in the way or blocks us from navigating that?
I think it could. So for me, like when I see like future Jasmine, it like is actually kind of terrifying.
Why?
Because I'm like, damn, she's so successful. Like, it, like if I imagine myself like in the life that like I desire, it like it's terrifying, because I'm like, oh my gosh, like that'd just be so overwhelming in like all of the best ways, and it becomes like, and I think it then like turns the mirror back on myself of like, the Jasmine today is not ready for that yet, and then so it's terrifying, and it's also like frustrating, because I'm like, well, I want to be ready for it because I actually want it today. And so, yeah, I think that like it definitely, that future version of self that like you see, or the life that you want to live that you see sometimes, like is the thing that is like another hurdle that you have to get over in whatever way that like that manifests for you.
That's what it feels like. It's like constant hurdles and hurdles and hurdles. So it's like, I just want everything to be healthy, bro. Like, I want a healthy love. I want a healthy career. I want to be successful. Like, I just want it all.
I just
like,
want to do it all.
But no, it's time and patience and patience.
Yeah.
And, mistakes after mistakes after mistakes. And I feel like, for me, the one thing that I'm like really, and I had, so on my story, I asked people what my toxic trait is. And typically, to popular belief, my friends.
What were your toxic traits, Nigel?
I
didn't actually participate in this one.
No,
so
it's fine. It's fine. It's
I
fine.
actually am curious.
So according to the submissions, my toxic traits are taking care of others before yourself, not having boundaries when talking to people, shoving people away.
Yes, that's fearful avoidant.
Yep, gaslighting yourself, fearful avoidant. Self-doubt, fearful avoidant. Not giving yourself flowers. Sensationalism / overthinking. Internalizing you don't deserve the love you give to so many people. The list continues.
They were reading you for filth.
Yeah. Self-sabotaging when you know who and what you want. Not basking in the light that you give others. Not believing the stuff you post because it all applies to you. Trying to help everyone you meet and then forgetting to build on the relationships with the people that have been with you or helped you from the beginning. Asking others to be extremely open about their feelings when you're not. And not telling your story enough. Those were the submissions. As a friend, do you agree or disagree?
Well done, Instagram. Well done.
Yeah. So I had a conversation with a childhood friend, and basically what she was saying is like, from that whole list, it sounds like a self-worth problem. And I think like when it comes down to it is, instead of like navigating life as you know, you navigate life with a hesitation of you wonder, you think. So it's like you don't fully believe. You're just constantly in this state of like, you think it's a possibility. It can or can't happen. And she was basically saying like, what you really got to start doing is going from this I think to this I know, and understanding like, you know that you show up. Like, you're in grad school, you're in a PhD program. You know you're gonna get this PhD. So don't sit there and question it and wonder, oh, do I belong? Because you know you're possible. Like, you know you're a good person. You know you show up for a lot of people. Being able to like understand that that's going to pay off and you're going to get to those places. So I think like right now I'm in this place of really trying to shift my mentality to like, no, you do believe in yourself and you know you're going to get it. It's going to be a matter of time. It might take forever, but shit, it could happen tomorrow. It could happen the next day, but you know it's coming.
It's coming, yeah.
Versus like, oh man, I don't know if it's coming. Like,
I hope it's coming.
I hope it's coming. Oh man, I like her and I don't know if it's going to work out. Like, I don't like, no, I know it's going to happen eventually. And if it doesn't happen with her, it's going to, somebody even better is going to come along who's more for you. So it's like trying to like shift my mentality into kind of getting into that mind space is a lot. Cause I think for me, it's always been a self-worth problem. It's like the worthiness in which I feel has not matched the output that I give in a lot of settings that other people see clearly, but I'm blind to it because I can't see my own self.
You just said so much. And your friend, like, even what your friend said around, right? Like, you just have to operate, like, in the confidence that you just know. I'm like, wow, what a way to approach the world. And I'm like, that's not how I approach it.
Yeah, it's not at all. Like,
not how I approach it at all.
Not at all.
But, like, I'm like, how could life look differently if I did, though? Right? Like, that's such a, like a bold, I think it's such a like bold and courageous way. It's like approach like just everything in life, right? Like you just know it's gonna work out. Like, and it might not work out like exactly how I envision or see it right now, but like I like that it's gonna work out. So.
It's crazy because I think a lot of the hesitation and a lot of the self-doubt like comes from not having that belief, right? And not knowing. It's like I could get dressed and I'll be like, oh man, I don't know. Like I'll even say to myself, oh, I don't know if my fit is fitting. Like maybe let me change something else. Then you change it like, I think this ain't the one. But it's like she brought up this analogy of like it's the same way a guy can wear whatever, go into a room and know he's gonna be good and know he's confident and knows like whatever comes out of it, like it's gonna be a good experience. In my mind, when she said that, I thought about like, damn, I really don't navigate with this like belief, like this undeniably, it can be like insane belief in myself of like, yeah, I want to show up. And like the minute she said that, I was like, damn, damn, now I see why I be struggling in a lot of spaces. Because, like, I go into rooms not as, like, I know for a fact I go into rooms not as the confident one, as the person who's like, oh, I'm bringing value to here, regardless of, like, what I say, what I do, I'm bringing value. I go into this room as like, damn, there's a lot of big hitters in here. Yeah. Man, how am I going to prove myself? Versus, like, oh, I'm him. I'm that guy. Like, let me just be myself. So yeah, she said a lot on that one.
Yeah. Kudos to friend.
Shout out to Lisa. Make that podcast, friend. Had to put her on the spot. But yeah, so like when it comes to like for you, how are you navigating that place of overcoming that rejection and overcoming your attachment style to get to like a healthier place for yourself?
I think a lot of it is like just mentally disrupting like these spirals. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I wish like I wish there was like a tool that just let me see how many times a day I'm like overthinking or spiraling about something that like I've actually misinterpreted. Mm-hmm. And so I'm learning that oftentimes like I'm spiraling because I'm misinterpreting an interaction with someone. Yeah. But because I have anxious attitude, like it just like we're down the rabbit hole very quickly. And so I think a lot of how I'm trying to navigate, I think I've become like much more aware of it over the last like year. And so I think because I've become more aware of it, I know I'm learning how to better own that like this needs to be disrupted and like this is actually not a healthy narrative. And like as my therapist said, like there's also half of the story missing because when you're interpreting an interaction with someone on your own without talking to them, like you miss their half of the story. So if you create a whole story about something that happened but you only have half the story, like like you would never do that in any other setting. And I was like, yeah, you're right. That actually sounds like that doesn't even sound logical that I would be doing that. So I think I've gotten much better at just like disrupting those spirals. I have one of my really good friends, like in the middle of spirals, I will message her like, hey girl, spiraling. And like we'll voice note through it. Mm-hmm. And she does the same because she spirals a lot too. And so I know like who some of my people are that are also helpful in sort of like disrupting like that in a way that like feels healthy and productive. Yeah.
I think like what's beautiful about what you said is like sometimes like it's not, you can't like overcome that stuff by yourself, because I think like I'm very guilty of like spiraling, and then I'll be like, I'm gonna figure this out myself, right? And I think recently, especially like the most growth I've had is when I'm bouncing it off people who like I know love me and who I love, and the ones who can help me see it in a way that's not from a place where they're 100% on my side and you're like, nah, you're always right, but people from like, nah, like you're being way too hard on yourself. You got to look at it from this angle. Yeah. Or like, nah, what you're saying in this part of the story is like true. Like you did make this mistake, but hold on, look at the whole other side of the story. And there's also mistakes on them sides. Because I think like, if you're anything like me, I'm very great at like taking all the responsibility and taking all the blame and then feeling like, oh yeah, I did this, so I gotta fix it. And it's all on me, and it's something I did. Where it's like, no, sometimes it's like, yo, you don't even recognize like what the other side or what's going on with the other scenario. So yeah, it's being able to lean on those people is definitely like important. And for you, how do you kind of like navigate when to like talk to those people, or when it's for you to kind of like figure out for yourself?
Man, that's a good question. I am learning how to do a better job of like trusting my intuition, and also knowing that like, because you have an anxious attachment style, that you are like, you've just been made aware of like, this is some consistent like pattern behavior. Like you probably don't need to be trying to figure out, like if you're in a spiral, you don't need to be figuring out by yourself, because like I don't have enough time of like disrupting this in like a healthy way to like be helpful by myself. So I'm usually always, when I recognize like I'm in a spiral, I'm always like, okay, like I need to go process this out with someone, because I need someone else to tell me like you're way left, or the cart has come before the horse, and like the cart's not even built yet, and you already have a cart and a horse. Like, you're slow down, right?
Yeah.
So I had to recognize that, like, I think for me, I know, like, I'm in a season right now where, like, I need other people to help me do that because I'm learning how to do it better for myself. Mm-hmm. And I think over time, right, then I will need people less.
Yeah.
But I'm also, like, I'm a verbal processor as well.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah, for sure.
Like, spending too much time trying to process something on my own has never been helpful. Like, regardless if I'm spiraling or not, like, trying to think through ideas by myself, like, is always, like, it feels overwhelming. Having to sit and, like, even in school, like, having to do stuff like, oh, you gotta sit and do this quietly. And, like, I want to talk to someone about, like, this assignment or this idea. Like, so I've always sort of, like, been like, I actually would kind of like to talk through this. So, yeah.
Being able to know yourself and to know that is, like, an incredible thing, too, for sure. Because I think, like, that's something I've almost, like, haven't accepted about myself, but I'm very similar. Like, the more I try to figure things out by myself, the more likely I build those narratives that are not, in my mind, I look this way. It's like, oh, this is healthy and this makes sense. But it's like, yo, you're forgetting the whole other side of the story.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think, like, that's definitely true. And as you were talking, the one thing that, like, came to mind is when you're, especially like when you're like navigating all of this, right? It can be very heavy. It can be a lot. What are the things that you do to almost like give yourself grace?
I actually think I do a terrible job at that. Like, if we're being transparent, like I actually don't think I do a really good job at that at all. Like, I'm super critical of myself. I'm super hard on myself all the time about everything. And so it is very easy for me to tell other people, like, just give yourself grace. Like, you don't have to have it all figured out. Like, give yourself grace. And me, I'm always like, girl, why do you not have this figured out? And, like, you should know better and you should be doing better. And, like, why are you still showing up this? Like, and so, yeah, I don't do a good job at that. I don't have a practice of graciousness and, like, tenderness towards myself. I'm working on it, but, like,
no, that's real.
We're in the
like,
beginning.
That's real. Because I promise you, like, I'm in that same.
Okay.
I'm in that same space. Yeah, I'm in that same space, and I think, like, yo, it's crazy because I think, like, again, fearful avoiding type tendencies, or just me being just me, is like how I react to moments where I should give myself grace is always the extreme, right? So it's like, to give an example, and this is not one of my brightest moments now that I see it, it's like when I'm going through something and I'm like really frustrated, for me, I need like dramatic change because I get so mad at myself for not doing better or for falling for the same stuff over and over and not learning my lesson, that I'm like, you gotta like make something dramatic happen for yourself. So like, one of the things that I have done at one point of my life, maybe be recently, maybe not be, but I told my friends that it's like, yo, I don't want to talk about certain like situations or people or anything. And if I talk about it, then I'm going to cash app you $20. So that way I can keep this boundary as strong as possible because I get so frustrated. And although that's not the healthiest thing, because of course you got to talk through things, as we just discussed, verbal processing. But I think like sometimes I just get frustrated with myself of like, if I'm talking about the same problem over and over and over and over and over and there's no solution and I'm not making that change, to me, that's like the most frustrating thing. And I think where I try to like almost like strong arm myself to it, that's where I need to start placing that grace. So like, do you at least recognize the moments when you deserve grace?
No. I think I also think that is a result of having to like be the strong woman, be the independent Black woman, like carry it, what it feels like the weight of the world. And so it's like, you don't, when you're unlearning how to be a strong Black woman, but like you've been conditioned to like show up in that way for so long, like you don't have grace for yourself. And so like you're like operating at such a pace where it's like you don't even have time to slow down and think like, oh, I could have given myself more grace in this situation. And so I think I'm now in a space where I'm like, one, I don't want to be strong anymore. Like, I hate it. Like, I just want to be soft.
Yeah.
I don't want to be strong anymore. And so I think because I'm like, I've changed the pace that I think I'm able to better identify that there is more grace that is needed.
So what does a soft black woman look like to you?
I don't know.
Okay. Quick answer. Very quick.
Okay. So here's why I don't know.
Okay.
Or I don't even know that it's that I don't know. I think it's like I am still figuring out what that looks like for Jasmine. Because like social media will tell you what like it means to be a soft black girl, and it's like luxury, and it's like it's this aesthetic that TikTok and Instagram have like created. And like that might work for them, right? But like I want to be soft for myself, not for social media. Like I want to learn like how are we gonna live like a soft life? Like not just like show up and like, oh, like this is a really cute like aesthetic-y thing and like we're gonna post it like soft girl, right? And so I think I am learning to explore like where I've had my defenses up the most, and like where I can like, okay, you can like breathe and you don't have to like be on guard. You don't have to lead in this situation or this scenario. But yeah, I think I'm figuring out like what it looks like for me, and that's hard in a place like social media where like everybody's trying to tell you like
what it looks
what
like,
the aesthetic is supposed to be, and like what it should look like for you. Is like, so that's why I don't know. I also think like there haven't been I don't think most black girls don't have a model of like what it means to be soft and to like live a life of ease. So there's a lot of us who are like becoming more aware like that is the life that we want to live, but because it's hard for us to even identify like who has that life that is like not a celebrity. Right? Like who is someone tangible that I know that can touch and feel, that like has a life of ease. And I think that's the other part that's hardest sometimes, like similar to like in professions, right? Where like it is important to see mirrors of yourself or like of who you want to be. And I don't think a lot of black women have had mirrors of women that like look like them, that are soft or that have ease, except people that have like absorbent amounts of wealth. And that's not realistic for a lot of black women. So I think that we're trying to create mirrors for younger folks so that we can show.
Yeah. I think like one, you said so much, and like it's very powerful and very real. And I think like the one thing that I'm like realizing, or what I realized, is what you talked about, because I was thinking of like soft black women, but I'm also thinking of this like, what does it look like to be a soft black man, right? And I think a lot of like what you're discussing is that so much of how these terms show up, it's in a way that puts somebody on a pedestal, and then we strive to be that person, where for a lot of these things we almost have to redefine it for ourselves and what's it look like for ourselves. And how it looks like for me is going to look different than my friends or my homeboys or like all these different people. But it's almost, again, it's like believing in the process and believing in the work for you, and understanding that it's going to show up differently for other people. And I think that's something that's almost hard to come in terms with, especially when you don't know, because so much of like our learning process is basing it off or comparing it to what other people are doing. And I think that's something that like, when I think of my own masculinity, or what I think like what it means to be a man, or what does it mean to be a lover, or what does it mean to be a creative and somebody who has a talk show, like how I show up is differently than how other people have made it or established themselves. And a lot of times you often feel guilty for not showing up in similar ways as other people. And we don't recognize we get into that spiral until we're so deep in, we're stressed, and we're like, you know, I'm done with this. I'm done. I don't even want to do it. I don't want to touch it. I don't want to look at it. Yeah. And I think like, again, these are like those moments where almost in that effort to redefine it for ourselves, I think that is almost giving ourselves grace too. So I think just like everything you said almost made me feel better, because I'm like, damn, like, yeah, that's just so relatable. And it like almost like took some of that relief off. So I think the more, you know, like we talked through it, we worked through it, and we kind of like try to figure things out, the more we learn like, okay, these are those moments for grace. Like this is when we gotta take it easy.
Yeah. When I think about particularly like softness and like ease and like what that looks like and what it means for me, I keep going back to like not the youngest version of myself, but like I keep going back to like these younger versions of myself, because when I think about like the easiest life that I ever had, it was when I was like 5 and when I was 10, like because the world had not yet stripped me of like my identity. And so I was living in like this little bubble of like innocence of like, oh, the world is like really gonna try to get at you and like tell you who you need to be and how you need to behave and what you need to think and like how you need to show up. And so like I'm like, like what was fun back then? Like what did I enjoy doing? Like what made me laugh and like what made me happy? Because I think when I think about like a life of like softness and ease, like it's like, yeah, like I'm doing the things that I enjoy simply because I enjoy them. Right. And I'm like leaning into the things that like make me happy simply because they make me happy. Right. And whether I do that with people or by myself, like I'm doing it because I know for me, like it's a source of joy. And so I've been spending a lot of time just thinking back to like, yeah, like what was fun back then that like I stopped doing because at some point someone told me like that like, oh, you shouldn't actually be doing that, or it's actually weird or odd that you find a lot of joy in that thing. And so like I started reading again like in 2020 because like as a kid, I was devouring books as a kid because it was like I just loved it. Like I loved it. And so like I'm like, yeah, life of ease means like I could just pick up books and read and like get lost in books. And like for me, I know that is a part of like building a life of ease. Books might not be for everybody. And that's cool. Like if you're not a reader, you're not like if you don't want to read in that way and that's not fun to you, cool. But for me, I'm like, no, like that's a part of like building a life that is soft and like full of ease. It's like curating time to like read and to just be in a library and like go to bookstores, like because that's always like felt fun to me.
So how do you like create space for that? Or do you feel like there's a lot of resistance?
Yeah. That.
A lot of resistance in that?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of resistance because I don't even know why. And when you create space, when you say create space, like there's a part of me when people say that, I always imagine like creating space is like, wow, and like we've cleared this like massive area. And I actually think creating space starts like this.
Gotcha. So small steps.
And then can incrementally get bigger. And so like the thing that I do now is like we read before bed. And like that has been, well, November sort of threw me off, but that's been like a pretty consistent like part of like a nightly-ish thing that I do is like we're gonna spend 10, 20, 30 minutes like reading before we go to bed.
Gotcha.
And then what that looks like over time, like we'll see.
Yeah. And honestly, like I think that's the beauty of it all. From like everything that we talked about today, I think it's this expectation that we have that it's like this quick quantum leap to get to like where we're trying to go, but we essentially have to take it one step, one day, one thought, one moment at a time, and then like gradually build into something bigger. But also like giving ourselves that grace and that space to be able to allow ourselves to like, you know, we did this for 2 weeks straight and then we had 1 or 2 or 5 bad days, to not like let that redefine or change how we view like our whole growth and everything that we've done. Because I think like so often we do that and then we get back and we go back to that old mentality where it's like we gotta just remember like we're working towards this like future goal. So Jazz, I just want to say thank you so much for joining, being on the Convo.
Thanks, bestie.
You already know, bestie, come on, you already know how we rocking. All right, y'all, that was the Convo. Thank y'all for tuning in. Catch us next time. Peace and love, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.